Hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Megsy, and today I'm going to be doing something a little different. Something I promised that I'd do in one of my previous videos, and that is discuss books that were popular when I was growing up during Y2K. These are YA books and middle grade books that were really popular for young girls during that time. So if you came of age in the late 90s to mid 2000s, this video is going to be for you. The first book, well, this was a series, if anyone remembers this, was the Dear America series. These were, apparently it was published by Scholastic, a series of historical fiction books that were all in a diary form, and they told the point of view of a young girl during a specific period in history, and she was writing a diary about something happening at that time. These apparently started in 1996. I think I read these probably in the late 90s. The first book was A Journey to the New World, which was about a pilgrim on the Mayflower. I do remember the title, When Will This Cruel War Be Over? That was a Civil War diary about a Southern belle. uh, Makes me a little uncomfortable because when I went back and actually looked at My Heart Is on the Ground, no, sorry. When I went back and looked at the book, When Will This Cruel War Be Over? People were saying how it was like an apologia for slavery. What were we teaching our children? I definitely remember the book My Heart Is on the Ground, which was about a Sioux girl. I know there's one about the Titanic, girl in the Titanic. There was like a little ribbon you could use as a bookmark. And I think probably this series is actually what started my love of historical fiction in general and centering female narrators. Another similar series that apparently started in 2002 was the Girls of Many Lands series. Apparently, it's from the American Girl Doll collection. I didn't know that. So it would follow had an accompanying doll, and it would follow a girl living in a different time period in different parts of the world. And I remember I had let me see, I definitely had the French one, Cecile, Gates of Gold, Isabel Taking Wing, that's England. Neela Victory Song, India, about a young girl in, what is this, 1930s India, marching for peace and India's independence. Oh, teaching decolonial studies to children at a young age. I approve. There was one about an Inuit girl. Interesting, but unfortunately it was written by a white woman. I don't know how long I read these for because there were other books later on that kept going that I stopped reading, but I also really loved that series. Another series that I really enjoyed that I read in middle school, I don't know, these books probably came out in the late 90s, early 2000s, was the Friendship Ring series by Rachel Vail. And the story is about, the series followed different girls. Basically, it sort of focuses on the really complex, nuanced friendships that young girls have as they're on the cusp of adolescence. And I remember it was very realistic and it wasn't light and fluffy. And the one book I still remember, called Not That I Care, it was actually kind of a little bit very dark. It was, I remember that the whole story is this girl who, Morgan, please don't ask me how I remember this. I do remember this though. She is essentially abandoned by her best friend for another girlfriend, and then she's doing this show and tell presentation in front of class, and she has to put different objects in a bag that and what they each represent and symbolize to her. And as she's doing this, she's going through flashbacks in her head, and also about her former friendship with her best friend. And I remember loving this story. I feel like I did a book report on it. We could do a book report at choosing in seventh grade. Yeah, I really enjoyed that series. A book that I really liked, apparently this was published in 1996, probably read it in the late 90s, was The Music of Dolphins by Karen Hesse. That is about a feral child that's raised by dolphins. It sounds realistic, but the narrative was, she's completely feral when she's taken into this research lab, and then as she learns the English language and learns how to express her thoughts and be around humans, the writing becomes more dense and complex, and the font gets smaller, and then she starts to like regress in the novel, and it starts getting larger again and like repeats back to the beginning. Ooh, definitely kind of gritty and dark. Yeah, of course I love that stuff. But that does not mean that I did not suffer from reading really terrible YA chick lit type of stuff. So a series I really loved was, I don't know if I loved, but I definitely read a decent amount. I probably read like the first 4 books. The Georgina Nicholson series by Louise Dennison. Now this is a British author, and I remember the series would start where the main character, Georgina Nicholson, would like address the reader, but she would talk to the reader like she just knew Americans were reading her work, and she'd be like, "Dear readers, like I don't know why you called the loo the bathroom, because I've never felt like taking a bath in a loo." So these titles are ridiculous, right? These are the books in the series. Angus Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging. That was the first book. Angus was her cat. On the Bright Side, I'm Now the Girlfriend of a Sex God. That was the second title. I'm surprised my mom let me read that when I was 14. Knocked Out by My Nunga Nungas. The third title. And the fourth title was Dancing in My Nudie Pants. I think after Dancing in My Nudie Pants, I stopped because I had enough. But I am ashamed to admit, I remember reading this when I was like 14-ish. Yeah, I'm like embarrassed that I read that. Also, I also ate this crap up, the Princess Diaries series. Oh, Meg Cabot. Oh God. Yeah, I don't know how many books I read of that. Maybe the first 4. I did see the movie. I think I saw the movie. I must have seen the movie before the books, because I think the movie came out in 2000. And then that got me interested in the books. Whereas with Harry Potter, I read the first. I read the books first, but the reason I started reading the books was because the first movie was coming out. So I started reading Harry Potter in like 2001, which was the same year Harry Potter the movie first came out, the first one. And why do I remember this? Because I remember going to see Harry Potter in like December of that year, and it was only a couple months after 9/11, and that's how I remember that. I know, I was a dark child. A book I really, really disliked that was very, very popular in the early 2000s was a book called Stargirl by Jerry Spinelli. I couldn't even really articulate why, but I really hated that book. And I even had an 8th grade teacher who like praised the book and said we should all read it. And I couldn't put my finger on like why I hated it. And now years later, I was looking at reviews when I was preparing for this video, and someone was like, this guy just wrote about a manic pixie dream girl. The main character was literally a manic pixie dream girl. I was like, that's why I hated this book, because this character, this poor ostracized girl, was not relatable at all. The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, another series that was turned into a movie. America Ferrera was in it. She was also in a Disney film, one of those like directed TV Disney films called Gotta Kick It Up, that followed like a group of like Latina cheerleaders. Does anyone remember that? I really enjoyed it. But yeah, I remember reading The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, and there was like the second summer of the Sisterhood. Was that like the sequel? It followed like 4 different girls, and they would mail these like pair of jeans to each other, that they all, even though they were all different sizes, they all could magically fit in. And definitely, I feel like this book has sex scenes. I'm thinking about it. Other titles that I know I read, but I do not recall: The Earth, My Butt, and Other Big Round Things by Carolyn Mackler. I definitely owned this. I don't remember it at all, but the title sounds very 2000s fat phobic. Yeah, that was the culture. Speak by Laurie Halse Anderson. This was really good. This was also pretty gritty. I think it came out in like 1999. I read it probably a little older, and it was about a young woman who was raped by another student at the school, and she developed selective mutism as a result of her trauma. And I know she sort of has like this secret, like abandoned classroom or den, which is where like she sort of hides away. I remember this book because it definitely stuck with me, and it was pretty well written, and I think it was really good at like writing about heavy-handed subject matter. I don't know if this book has been banned. Probably, it probably has. People probably tried to ban this book. The Sloppy First series, I remember that one. I guess I was in high school when I was reading that. I don't, yeah, I don't know if I really liked that. I read it, but it just was very cynical. And who was like the guy in it that the main character eventually gets with? He was weird. I didn't like him. Why did the main character get with that guy in the end? He didn't treat her right. Ugh. Teaching girls toxic relationship stuff at a young age. A book that I had that I recently wanted to reread was California, Massachusetts, Timuktu. I remember this book because it kind of was similar to Mona Simpson's Anywhere But Here. I didn't read that book, but I saw the movie with Natalie Portman and Susan Sarandon. And the main character, I remember like there were pretty like frank depictions of being sexually harassed as a young girl by your classmates. And the mother is like very flighty, and she just sort of drags her two girls around. As part of a school assignment, the main character, she has to like she kind of writes this like fictionalized version of life on the Oregon Trail, but she inserts herself, her own stories, and traveling around with her mother into it. Yeah, I actually wanted to, again, I don't know if they even counts as YA. Might have been like a bridge between YA and regular fiction. I want to know who the author was. I think it was like Stephanie Rosenfeld. Yeah, Stephanie Rosenfeld was published in 2003. And then another book that I remember reading, I wanted to reread this, but I used to have it and I got rid of it, was How the Light Gets In by MJ Hyland. There was definitely certain scenes in this book that stuck with me. And I think it was about like a young Australian girl who, I don't know if she comes to America or she has like a foster family or something, and she doesn't fit in with them. She talked about like being harassed by the teenage son, and I felt like the depictions in there were very spot on. Yeah, so those are all the books I can think of that I read and devoured as a young girl, coming of age, that were published in the 2000s, late 90s. I know that there are others, but those are the ones I can just think of off the top of my head. I mean, I of course read other books that didn't come out at that time but were classics. Little House on the Prairie. Remember, I mentioned I love the Black Stallion series, but yeah, those are all the books I could think of, and people want to ever check them out if they like YA. I don't know. Comment down below if you have any books that you loved and remember growing up, strictly from this time period, because a lot of people really seem to be romanticizing Y2K. I don't really know why, but yeah, as someone who came of age during the 2000s, I thought I would share some of the books I really loved or just read. Probably wouldn't love them now, but yeah. All right. I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.